Hello, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, as South Koreans face an unprecedented number of immigrants, is the country facing an identity crisis? Our digital producer today is Anushay Hussain. She's here filling in for Malika. Anushay, there are conversations where everybody has a take on them because wherever they happen in the world, it's very similar. So the idea of a culture having immigrants coming in and how it copes with that culture, that's really what we're talking about, but South Korea is our focus.
Exactly.
What are you seeing online?
Well, it's really interesting because the issue of identity is obviously something that we all have to struggle with, and everybody struggles to kind of define this throughout their life. And our online community seems to be saying that Koreans must embrace this change that's happening in their society. But then there's a large part of our community that's also saying the very kind of idea of being Korean is to not embrace diversity. But of course, it's a live show, and we want to hear from you. If you think we're missing a perspective or anything, tweet me, use the hashtag HAStream.
You can see her sitting next to Anushay. Her name is Cindy Lu Hao. Cindy is the director of the upcoming film Even the Rivers, which examines how South Korea's schools are responding to their increasingly diverse classrooms. Now, this is a show that is your show. So without you, Anushay and I would be here sitting talking to ourselves. So we love hearing your program ideas, and if there is a story that you think would be perfect for the stream, get in touch with us directly. Go to our About page, and that's at stream.aljazeera.com/about. And I'm on it right now. I'm just going to scroll down here because I want you to see where the Twitter handles are. Here's mine, here are our producers. So if you have an idea that you think would be perfect for the stream, tweet us and you could inspire a future program.
Hi, my name is Ernest Owens, scholar at the University of Pennsylvania and blogger for the Huffington Post, and I'm in the stream.
A multicultural and multi-ethnic society is an emerging reality that is leading to a lot of racial and social conflict in South Korea. Faced with an aging population and an influx of migrant wives, many in the country are clinging to their ethnically homogenous national identity. Recently, photos of a young woman protesting the government's multiculturalism policies drew fresh attention and ignited heated online debates over the issue in Korea. Now, as the government scrambles to focus a multicultural vision for the country, are Koreans ready to redefine what it actually means to be Korean? So to help us discuss this issue from Seoul, we have Chan-woo Dik-jang. He is a president of the Movement for the Advancement of the Cultural Diversity of Koreans, or MAC for short. We also have in our Google Hangout, joining us from South Korea, Sergeant Kwok, Sarah Shaw, and from New York, Yoo-eun Lee. So there's certain phrases, Cindy and Gregory, where it really helps you to know how Koreans think about these phrases before we even start the conversation. I want you to give us a quick fire glossary. I'm going to throw out a couple of phrases to you, and you tell me what they mean in the Korean perspective. Are you ready, Gregory, as well?
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Cindy. Multi-ethnic.
It means of two ethnic backgrounds. So instead of multiracial, we're dealing with maybe two Asian ethnic backgrounds, so Vietnamese and Korean, Filipino and Korean.
Multiracial.
It means of having a Korean background and another background, and we use that term here in the States to refer to people of two different races.
Mixed heritage.
It means someone who may have two different heritages, may be of the same racial background.
Multicultural.
Maybe they have two different cultural backgrounds.
Oh, okay, Greg. And Chan-woo. Greg is also known as Chan-woo. He has a Korean name and also an English name as well. Ethnic Korean, what does that mean?
I guess ethnic Korean kind of means Korean in one sense. Usually if you're Korean or you grew up in Korean. And then the other meaning it could have would be whether you have a Korean background. But usually it refers to like what we call Korean. You're just 100% Korean. One
blood, what does that phrase mean in the Korean vernacular?
For Korea, it just means that, Korea feels that and it has a lot to do with patriotism, but it just means that we're all one big family, that we all come from the same family, we're all Korean, and nothing can separate that. It's kind of a pure blood kind of attitude.
And one more, because this is exhausting. Amerasian almost speaks for itself, but give us the historical perspective for that.
All right, so Amerasian, as well as other terms like Eurasian, were actually one of the first, I guess, what I call the second wave of diverse Koreans. And that was usually where one parent is in the military and one parent is Korean. But admiration also extends out to Vietnamese and American soldier father, Cambodian and American soldier father. But in Korea, it specifically means Korean with an American soldier father.
What do you call yourself, Chang-woo?
I actually call myself just Korean in Korea. But if I go deeper into the conversation, I call myself mixed heritage.
See, this is the issue here. These are all the phrases that I just went through. There's so many. Is this the issue in Korea today? The idea of a mixture of what it means to be Korean and other nationalities mixing in? Is that what we're talking about today?
I would say yes. From my perspective, I really look at the diversity of Koreans, because when you start looking at individual identity, it's really hard for someone to tell someone what their identity should be. And so instead of looking at it from the individual perspective, I look at it from more of the society perspective, where the individual can have their dual identity or third culture identity if they have one. But if they connect with Korea, then Korea should be able to accept their connection, whether ethnically or through heritage, into Korean society. And that's what I kind of call the diversity of Korea. So that not only includes mixed Koreans, but that includes bicultural Koreans, Koreans that have immigrated, Korean Americans, Korean Russian, whatever that may be, adoptees that have been internationally adopted. All of those are under that diversity of Korea.
Cindy Lou, you were born in South Korea, so you're Korean, right?
I am American. Yes, that's how I identify myself.
Okay. So what has changed in Korean society and South Korean society over the last few years, where multiculturalism is even being broached as a subject?
I think that you know, and Sajin can add to his perspective on that for sure, and Greg as well. I lived there 4 years. What happened was in the 90s, we saw a influx of immigrant wives or mail order brides from Southeast Asian countries, and so like these women and the Korean
why did that happen? I mean, you just rushed through mail order brides, and people at home are going to say, what?
Well,
mail order brides? Explain that.
Okay, so Korea right now is facing a very low fertility rate in terms of births, and then they're also one of the world's most aging population. And so farmers are also looking for spouses to have families, and they are seeking out companionship from countries like Vietnam, China, and the Philippines. And so then the result of that is that we have children being born in Korea that are under that umbrella of being multi-ethnic Koreans.
So, Sergeant, Cindy just mentioned your name, and we were talking about things changing in South Korea. How are you seeing things change in terms of the racial mix of South Korea?
Well, you know, it's really interesting, and you know, I think that South Korea is trying to deal with all of this change while simultaneously trying to disavow its past. You know, multiculturalism has existed in South Korea for more than 60 years in the form of U.S. military camp towns, areas where the United States military has their bases and local people interact with the U.S. military. And these areas have become synonymous with human trafficking and prostitution. It's a massively humiliating situation for South Korean people. And while they're trying to put that behind them, at the same time, these complex feelings keep coming up in the conversation about the new immigrants here in South Korea.
Anisha.
I want to backtrack here for 1 second, Cindy, because I want to pick up on what you had just said about the mail order bride, which our community is also echoing. Jamila says every child picks up from the parents, especially the mom. So it is up to them to show the child how important education is. But a big issue that we're actually seeing in South Korea is because these women are migrant women and they're not ethnically Korean, they can't always speak Korean perfectly. And that actually leads to a lot of discrimination that the kids face at school. So I want to put this question to you. Explain to us a little about the entire phenomenon of mail order brides in Korea and kind of the cycle of poverty and exploitation.
Yeah, sure. So it's just not a problem of the culture, but there's an influx of women from Southeast Asia who married to rural South Korean men, and the number have exploded over 6 times over the past 5 years. And their marriage, of course, are processed very systematically through agencies, and no one can blame or dare to blame them following their dream and living a better life in country. It has generated a problem, which is the second generation. So these second generation, those kids who have there's a foreign mothers, they're just born with disadvantages, and they're from poor rural background. Their moms having language and culture issue, which will be inherited to them. And since their moms and dads are also very busy working, there comes the most serious problem, the education issue. So a study in 2011 shows the rate of those kids advancing to higher education were well below the average. Only 43% goes to high school, whereas Korean kids goes to high school like 92% of them. So it's just lost more than cultural problem. It's a mixture of socio-economic factors, poor economic standing, lack of education, and some language issue. And I was almost glad that Little Psy, those kids who appeared on Psy's music video case made into headlines, because it really shows, it reveals how non-100% ethnic Korean kids face in these days.
And if not, everybody's not just up to date with the Little Psy controversy, do you want to just tell us very quickly what happened?
Yes, this very cute, very talented dancer appeared on Psy's music video, and he has a Vietnamese mother, and there's been a flood of malicious comments, racist comments thrown at his Vietnamese mother, and this libel defamation case is going on.
If I could chime in.
Go ahead, Chan-woo.
One of the things with the language one is, and I think this is kind of something that kind of needs to be known, is in Korea, language and ethnicity and identity, they're all one. So when you think about Korea, unlike America or Europe, where you can have, a different citizenship and a different ethnicity and maybe even a different nationality, in Korea, they're all tied together. So the language is a really strong part of the Korean identity. And not just being able to speak Korean, but being able to speak Korean fluently like any other Korean in South Korea. So when we're looking at these things like language and we're looking at these kids that are in Korea, a lot of them are pushed out to these multicultural schools because they feel like that they need to learn the language there. But if you look at any of the, I guess like in America, mainstreaming the students with the support for language will actually improve their Korean, regardless of if the parent doesn't speak English very well.
Right.
My mother didn't speak English well either, but I'm pretty fluent, I think.
Yeah, you'll pass. Cindy, education that's the subject of your documentary,
Yes.
and particularly the way that some multi-ethnic children are sort of bypassing the education system. Can you get us up to speed with that and make us understand what that really means for kids?
Right. Just to add with that is that some of these kids, a lot of the schools now, government-sponsored segregated schools, they're setting those up to provide children with Korean language support, as mentioned earlier, and culture skills about Korean culture. But in my documentary, Even the Rivers, it highlights that there are many multi-ethnic Koreans that are fluent in Korean, and they're being discriminated because of the way they look, not necessarily just their acquisition of the language. And then I think that's the overall issue that's not being addressed.
Often you look at the media as a way of helping people get used to the concept of immigration or change. I also want to show you a little clip of an NBC report, which is a station in South Korea, to give you a sense of sometimes the xenophobia is actually reflected in the media and not challenged. Just check this out.
외국인들을 쉽게 볼 수 있는 곳들을 찾아가 봤습니다. 거리 곳곳에서는 외국인들과 한국 여성으로 보이는 커플들이 과감한 포즈로 활보하는 모습을 볼 수 있었는데, 한국 여성들이 많이 찾는다는 한 클럽을 가봤습니다. 이곳에선 눈길조차 두기 어려울 정도의 애정 행각을 쉽게 볼 수 있는데요. 마치 영화의 한 장면이라고밖에 생각할 수 없는 스킨십. 이들의 이런 행위는 과연 신뢰가 쌓인 관계 속에서 이루어지고 있는 것일까요?
So Sarah, you're a travel writer, you live in South Korea, you study the Korean language, so there's a really sense that you're the outsider but also the insider as well. Have you seen any evidence of xenophobia or racism at all towards you, or do you see it in your wider circle?
Yeah, definitely. As a white Westerner, actually, we're given a lot of privilege in South Korea. But at the same time, we're alienated from the culture. So the expectations are very low that just because they see me and I'm white, they don't expect me to speak Korean at all, actually. But when I'm out sometimes, like for example, one time I went to a club in Daegu with some friends, and there was a sign at the club that said "No foreigners allowed." And there is times like that where there's just very blatant discrimination that you might not see in Seoul, but you see outside of Seoul that still exists.
And so would you say that rural South Korea is different in terms of an attitude than urban South Korea?
Well, that still is happening in many urban centers, but I would say my experience was different living in Seoul than being in cities outside of Seoul.
Our online. Sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to chime in about
ahead.
that video quickly.
Sergeant, yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch that video as a Westerner, you can immediately think, wow, these people are really backwards and racist. And by no means, don't misunderstand me, I'm not defending the video. I just want to give a little context to that video. Because, as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. military camp towns were ground zero for multicultural interactions in South Korea. But they were also the site of systematized and institutionalized trafficking and prostitution of South Korean women to the U.S. military. And so these days, when South Koreans see race mixing happening at clubs and that type of situation, it really brings back these very uncomfortable and difficult memories for South Korean people. And I think that, that video really demonstrates that South Korean people have an extremely ambivalent relationship towards the West. On one hand, they admire the West for its wealth and its power, and on the other hand, South Koreans feel deeply humiliated by this camp town system that exists in South Korea.
Cindy.
Yeah, I would definitely want to add on to that. I think that that's what we have to understand is Korea has been a very resilient country. It has gone through colonization, Japanese occupation of the country for a long period of time, and then they suffered through the Korean War. So there has been, their moniker is Hermit Kingdom. They've come from being closed off to the world to being very open, and now they are a global leader. And so I think that that's where the challenge lies with them, is that they're trying to balance how do we maintain being a part of this global community and learn how to negotiate diversity within ourselves.
Exactly. Our online community is actually picking up on this whole theme of the fact that we're a global community. But it seems like whenever there's a new wave of immigration in communities, people always are afraid of them. So Clay Jarvis is saying it sounds similar to the situation here in Japan. It's a deep-rooted problem, one that grows out of a mix of historical pride and xenophobia. Until youth have the courage to contradict their elders' backward views on immigration, there will be no chance for progressive ideas to catch on. And here Lewis is saying, we, Koreans, are educated as one nation and one tribe for a long time. We're called Han Tribe. They claim that protecting their own citizens is the first priority of the Korean government. We have this question from our online community that I want us to take a listen to. And Greg, I want to pose this question to you, so let's have a listen.
The main problem is the fact that there is no real multiculturalism policy in Korea. It's not much more than a trendy keyword and issue amongst government suits who realize that population is changing quickly and South Korea is an extremely racist country, and that's pretty easy to figure out. And there probably won't be any change in a positive direction until awareness is raised through either a crisis or some kind of hate crime, to be frank.
So, Greg, I want to ask you this question based on what our online community member just said. How much would you say that being Korean is just based on not embracing or accepting diversity?
Well, it's really great that you asked it. We actually just held a forum this weekend on identity. And so when we looked at that, when you're looking at identity, Korea really has to focus on not so much of changing the identity, but expanding the definition of what is Korean. And I think that is going to be an easier process to do than to just totally change the identity and just say, oh, well, we can address the model of multiculturalism in Korea the way America uses their model for multiculturalism. And it's not going to work in Korea because there's a very different cultural attitude here. So I think really when we're looking at changing or helping Korea accept the diversity of Koreans, it's really about being able to kind of expand what is Korean. You probably won't really see this with the speaker. There is a sense of what he said is correct, but you probably won't see this until maybe 20, 30 years from now, when the mixed heritage Koreans have grown up and they start to go into society to become productive members of society, starting to find jobs, attending universities, and really asking for the same rights as being I guess, ethnically Korean or Korean. Until that happens, it's really just going to be kind of a putting out the fires of what's going on with multiculturalism right now.
I know, Sarah, you were trying to get in a little bit earlier. I heard you. I remembered you. What did you want to say?
I just wanted to say that about what I said before. Actually, there's not that many times where I experienced discrimination in a negative way, just because I am given lots of privilege in Korean society, and I can't really complain a lot about that.
Cindy.
I would like to add to what the video comment was, and to also agree with what Greg said, is that a lot of this stuff is not going to be seen until these children are adults and are asking for a piece of equality in society for themselves. But what I would like to point out is Korea has been very proactive in trying to pass multiculturalism policies. Like for the past 13 years, they've been trying to do an overview of like discrimination laws where people are protected. They passed the 2008 Multicultural Family Act. They have gone in and tried their best, the best way that they know how at this point, to support these families and children by creating community centers. They're having conferences with other leaders from other countries. I think they're bringing in a lady from Sweden to talk about racial policies. And I think that, for that end of what the viewer said, I can understand that it could possibly happen if children wind up being disenfranchised in this society, and they are the future. But at the same time, Korea, considering the percentage of people that are multi-ethnic or diverse in Korea, they have been very proactive on this issue.
Yoon Lee, you're 100% pure Korean in this conversation. When you hear this conversation, does it resonate with you? Does it make you feel uncomfortable at all?
Not uncomfortable, but I truly get why it takes so much energy and time to truly tackle the issue, because I am in my late 20s and, well, in somehow the young generation, I guess, still. And I clearly remember some phase from textbook. Almost every history textbook starts with declaration. The South Koreans are proudly one blood and ethnic homogeneous. So these changes are very radical and very fast, and just happening. This phenomenon has just happening in less than a decade. And if you see like government data, studies published by this government-funded research institute, most of them date back to 2007 or 2006. That means that is the point they start realizing, oh, this is gonna be a real game changer.
Right.
And as to add on to some of the video comments, how the government about this Korean governance policy, I kind of agree that it's kind of they treat it as a trendy thing, because there are lots of cultural centers and free language lessons, and those like the cultural center facilities are really like fancy and in the hearts of Seoul, and it looks great, but it never really truly touches the socio-economic problems these kids their lives have.
I can hear everybody. I can hear everybody on the Google Hangout. I can hear them all the way over in South Korea in Seoul and Nonsun here in the studio. Everybody's going So we have universal agreement. Thank you to all of our guests. You can hear more of them at stream.aljazeera.com, where the conversation will continue. Tomorrow, what are we doing? Happy birthday, African Union. Looking good for 50, or does it need a makeover? We will see you online. Hello again, welcome back to the Streams Online post show. We're discussing an evolving South Korea as it deals with its new multicultural and multi-ethnic population. Let's get right back into the discussion. I've just been checking out a little Sai. Have a look at him on my computer here. One of the things I wanted to check was if you look at little Sai, I can't tell that he's not Korean.
Me neither.
So what's the issue? Who said me neither? Was that you and Lee?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it.
So who found out that he wasn't 100% Korean?
Because he got popular, there are some haters, new haters.
Yeah.
And he appeared on a show with his mother, who was Vietnamese. So.
Yeah, and Chan-woo, you were just about to jump in.
Yeah, I was about to say, you know, one of the things with when we look at this multiculturalism thing is I consider it kind of to be three waves. The first wave was when Korea had a lot of multiculturalism with Japan and Chinese kind of mix. Then Amerasians came around as the second wave, and then the third wave would be the latest with the Southeast Asian mix. But if you look at where the biggest problem lies, or not problem, or the biggest focus is, if you're from any one of the culture that really creates a different look physically from regular Koreans or other Koreans, that's really where the focus comes from. So like with little Sai, unless he was on there with his mother or someone saw his mother or saw she wasn't necessarily Korean, he could probably get away with it, especially if his language proficiency was there. But once you add in features that stand out, for example, for me with my skin tone and hair color.
I don't know what you're talking about. You look South Korean to me.
You totally create another dynamic, and that's really where you kind of are always presented with the questions, or you're always presented with questioning what if you're Korean or not.
So Chan-woo, let's go there. What do people say to you? I remember when I was growing up in the UK, people used to say, "Where are you from?" And I would say, "London, mate." And they say, "No, where are you really from?" Which meant, "Why are you brown and what are you doing here?"
Right.
It's code. So what do people actually say to you?
Well, you know, it's really.
Just don't you hate that when that happens? We were just about to hear something juicy, and Chan-woo froze.
Well, I know for me, when I lived in Korea, people saw me as other. I wasn't Korean, but I didn't, unlike Chan-woo, assert myself as a Korean person. Even though I was born there, my mom's Korean, I said I'm American, I'm from America. And that was accepted, because in Korea, I feel like it's only two categories. You're Korean or you're foreigner.
I feel like for a lot of mixed heritage kids, it's like that. Like during the British colonization, you know, if you were half Indian, half British, you kind of had to choose if you were too light-skinned, if you were too dark, and you know, if you were kind of in the middle, you really had a huge problem with it. And our online community is picking up on this as well. Ahmed says, South Korea is facing a form of identity politics, which focuses on self-identification in every aspect without outside help. And then here Alex is saying, neither I nor any foreigner should have a right to tell a sovereign nation how to change itself demographically or otherwise, provided that nation respects the rights of the individual. But do you think in this case South Korea needs the global community's help, or do you think they're being proactive about it on their own?
I think that when I said earlier that they are being proactive, they're trying, but not necessarily in the most effective way. And they have a lot of people out there, like the United States, Europe, to help them address this diversity issue. And in terms of the respect for the individual, that's why this film, Even the Rivers, is about the children. This is the future, and they're not having access to education. They're being discriminated against. They're suffering psychologically because of that, being an outlier in their own society. This is their country, and they're not accepted as part of this country.
Sergeant, one of the descriptions that we used for you was activists. As an activist, what do you want to change, and how is it going to happen?
Oh, geez. You know, before I respond to that, I would actually like to add a little bit on to what both Cindy and Chanuk were saying. And I think one of the major problems with the conversation about multiculturalism here in South Korea is that it's been controlled by the majority. And as a consequence, there's an assumption that there is no discrimination. Discrimination is not a problem here. And that if multicultural kids can speak Korean fluently, and if they're culturally Korean, then there's going to be no problems facing these children at all. However, if we look at the Amerasian population that's been here in South Korea for 60 years, we can clearly see that's not the case. We have a group of people who are culturally and linguistically Korean who cannot be accepted inside of South Korean society because they look different. And even overseas Koreans, I'm talking about Korean Americans who are physically 100% Korean, but they were born in, let's say, America and they're not fluent in Korean. They come back to South Korea and they face a lot of discrimination as well.
You know, we lost him just as he was about to say something pretty amazing. It was so amazing, we called him back up. So Chan-woo, you were just about to tell us, I mean, like practically on the ground when people challenge you for maybe not being Korean, what are they saying to you?
Well, I mean, it's really just, like I said earlier, it's really about them, whatever their kind of definition of Korean is. So if they do have a definition where you're Korean if your father is Korean, or you're Korean if you know, if you're on the kind of the national registry, or if you've been to the military. So there's just a lot of different personal definitions of Korean, kind of based on what they've learned in school or based on their personal feelings. So it really just depends on who I meet and where they stand at on their identity or what they consider Korean.
You and Lee, there's a phrase that goes with a relationship that isn't going quite well, and it's complicated. And this is really complicated. How does an outsider understand it, or does it even matter that outsiders understand it?
Well, I think
Let me go to you and Lee, and then come back to you, Chan-woo.
Okay.
Okay, so I saw some of the comments that no, like not outsider can has the right to tell the sovereign nation to like change, but actually that it's not a matter of choice. One every 10 marriages involve foreign wives right now, so it's the problem they're facing right now. And like before they even tackle this issue, like the socio-economic background, I mean, so the foreign wives issue, the legal issues, some of the crime, increase of crime rates by foreigners, those kind of issues. Before they even start working on that, there's a second generation coming up. So they have to act immediately.
Sarah.
I just wanted to comment on adoptees and Korean Americans, also about discrimination against them as well. For myself, as a white foreigner, if I'm out together with friends of adoptee or a Korean American or even other Asian backgrounds, automatically people will speak to me in English. But when they find out that my friends don't speak Korean well, they're not treated the same way, where they'll ask, wait, aren't you Korean? Or why don't you speak Korean? And there's a lot of questions that ensue afterwards.
Let's just wrap this up with the community. I love to leave the last word to our online community, and they've been busy on this conversation.
They have. Anise says 97.8% Korean. What diversity. And then Ibrahim is saying, which I think is a great point to end the show on, when there is migration, definitely there will be multiculturalism. So multiculturalism can't be ignored in today's 21st century. And I think that that's what Korea is trying to move towards. It's a reality they have to embrace.
Right. And so the first comment about the population, I mean, right now we have, like, I think a registered population, 1.5 million foreigners that live in Korea. Now compare that to 50 million in the country. That's why I said Korea is trying to be proactive. This is a small number right now. We do have a long history, like Sajin said, of Koreans that are multi-ethnic. Right. And I do think that when there is migration, when there is brides, and when there are people coming there to work for the Korean dream, that there's going to be multiculturalism. And that's where I think that the global community can support Korea in helping them further along in the 21st century.
Now that's all we have time for today. The last word was the community, and then a little full stop on the end was Cindy Lu Hao. She's the director of the film Even the Rivers. Thank you very much to all of our guests. Chan-woo Dig-jiang, also known as Greg, and in the Google Plus Hangout, Yuan Lee, Sajin Kwok, and Sarah Shaw. I have to say a very big thank you to Sarah and also Sajin, because it is so early in the morning right now, and nobody could have told that you woke up specially for us. So, see, they're even smiling. They're thankful to be on the stream. We love you. Thank you very much. What are we doing tomorrow? Happy birthday, African Union. You're looking good for 50, or maybe the AU needs a makeover. That is a discussion for another day. In the meantime, we will see you online.